Right. Ladies and gentlemen, for this panel we have 4 esteemed authors. Well, first, we have David at the end.
Thank you for that.
It's so esteemed because he did only sort of say 4 esteemed.
Well, I suppose it is after lunchtime.
Yes.
Steam.
Okay.
Has anybody done the Elm in the bar yet?
They are eagerly awaiting your words of wisdom and the ability to flog them books.
It's just a queue at the bar.
Yes, I've noticed all my fellow authors have brought their own books. Whereas I bought a co-written book on how to write, or how to publish it. So yes, these filthy prose, as opposed to the artistic type. We've got 4 writers on introduction. It's nice to have a panel to discuss the writing craft for those people who want to do it or shouldn't. So would you like to introduce yourself? Starting on my it's a bit about you and your writing.
Yeah, I'm Tracy Norman. I do a lot of very odd jobs, including writing. So when I'm not doing writing, I do a bit of acting. I also do some historical research. I write a newspaper column. What else do I do? All sorts of things. Yes. So for writing, I've got a newspaper column. And it is sort of early Elizabethan historical drama, some fantasy, children's book. I've just sent one off to a publisher in America, which is a supernatural mystery. I co-wrote some non-fiction. I've got another non-fiction that I've got to send off to Cornwall. And then I think the American one was the second in the series, the supernatural. And then the history press makes another one, don't they? So yeah, there's quite a lot of writing going on.
And do you class yourself as traditionally published?
Not too late on.
Or independently published? You sound like a small press.
Yes, apart from the history press. So I'm kind of hybrid. So I've done some myself. I've got the one that I've just sent off to is a small press in America, and then the history press for the non-fic.
Right.
I only write non-fiction, really, because I don't have much of an imagination. You're right.
Yes, I'm fine.
Good. So I mostly write around themes of folklore and myth, which is my main area of research interest. So some of you will know me from having a podcast on that subject.
We all know you can scrap and do now.
Well, everyone knows me from Scooby-Doo now, obviously, but that's still tied into folklore. So I write non-fiction, and I'm on the traditionally published end of the table. Apparently, we were told we had to sit at this end so that the independent presses, the tradition, they started it.
I know. Well, we'll win.
Well, yeah. So aside from writing for, I write for the newspaper and for websites and things like that. But otherwise, I've got 3 previously published books. One that's with a copy editor, which comes out next year, and then 2 further titles, which are out next year as well.
Andy, you're the traditionally published
Thank you very much.
filthy pro who gets his
I have just.
Well,
I've exchanged. I've exchanged this point. I've exchanged this point of Guinness for one of my books.
Is that how it works?
That is now how it works. The equivalent rate is
we'll
1 pint
write
of
the
beer.
drink.
Yes, for those of you, many of you I already know from previous Armadacons, but for those of you that don't know me, sorry, I've got a very blocked nose, by the way, so I apologise for that in advance. My name is Andy Lane, or Andrew Lane. I've been writing for about 34 years, and I've got 42 books, I think the last couple traditionally published. So I'm very much at the trad end of the table. I've written young adult, I've written adult, I've written crime, I've written science fiction. I've done fiction and non-fiction. I also do audio scripts. I've just finished the 3rd Doctor Who audio script for the BBC for the 8th Doctor, to be read by Dan Starkey, who plays Sultana. So basically, I'm all over the place. That's me. I also have a small self-publishing arm. I have 2 of my own books that I've published. Basically, collections of short stories just to hoover them all up and put them in one place before they get lost.
This is a desperate attempt to join the rebels. They were so
Your books on this.
The Empire has decided that the Rebel Alliance may have a point after all.
War, it's a spectrum.
Spectrum is green.
I should have introduced myself first, because then we've had a progression towards trial publishing. I'm very much independently published, almost that is. I did an MA in creative writing, and a fellow called Andy Conway was my final project tutor. And we ended up, I started giving him a lift home, and he said, you should independently publish. And I went, no, it's fancy publishing, it's very rubbish. And he said, read this book. Let's Get Digital by David Baldwin. I got about page 5, I thought I'll stick a Kindle on my Christmas list. Got page 10, and I thought I'll order the Kindle now. I got page 15, and I was editing HTML and doing.
When you got page 15, did you realise you already had a Kindle?
I was reading this off a piece of paper.
Paper, I remember.
So I became an evangelist very, very quickly. Hence my insistence that the track publishers is very evident.
But don't you think that the idea of self-publishing being vanity press is breaking down now compared to what it used to be? I think it's still there in the background.
It's still there with traditionally published people in the publishing business. Those people who drink their Chardonnay have their nibbles at these events where they launch a book. They've forgotten about the writer, non-fact but they have this belief that a writer just suffers in their garret, produces this fantastic thing that they all talk about. Preferably after the writer's died, because they sell more. But yeah, it has changed. But there is a difference, I think, between independent publishing and vanity press.
Yeah,
But
very much.
if you ever start to publish and someone asks you for money, run away. Because that's the definition of vanity press. I know someone who paid someone £2,000 for the book. He had to reformat it after many days, produce a cover, and then they delivered boxes of books to him. That was it. So it was a very expensive
actually,
work.
technically, it's not so much publishing, it's printing, isn't it? They are just glorified printers. But from my point of view, on the training, the massive amount of effort that the trade publishers go to for publicity, and also just putting books on bookshelves in bookshops, and that's one of the big reasons for me going to trade publishers, because they've outsourced all the stuff that independent publishers would normally do.
Well, the response to that,
Yep.
I've heard a lot of something a bit harsh.
Like that.
I'm just turn the table round.
I've heard a lot of when we throw things, you've got more books in them. I had a lot of authors saying that their publishers get them to do all the social media stuff and go to events. So,
Oh yeah.
Sometimes
they'll do all
it's
the
in the
marketing.
contract. You have to. Sometimes it's in the contract that you have to spend 2 hours a day doing social media.
Really?
Yes.
I've never had that in a contract. I did get through a point about 7 or 8 years ago when I was doing the Young Sherlock Holmes books with Macmillan, and they were very big on social media then, and they actually put me on a course for a day with a number of other writers to learn how to use Twitter and I don't know what else it was, TikTok, stuff like that. No, that's the dance one,
You
isn't it?
didn't take notes then.
I didn't take notes. Chris Riddell, who's an illustrator,
Yeah.
he was on the course with me. And he started off to say, oh, I don't want to do this, I'm not going to use the internet, it's useless. He's now got a website with little dancing figures and everything. Bless him. What I seem to have picked up is the publishers over the past couple of years have realised that actually social media isn't delivering what they thought it was going to deliver. It's not delivering thousands and thousands of books. I've got like 300 followers on Twitter, that's nothing. And maybe I'll get 2 book sales out of that. So, no, I think they're realising social media is not going to do their job for them. And I talk as a guy who, the bookshop I grew up with is the Newham bookshop in East London. I used to go there as a kid, and I've got to know the proprietress Vivian reasonably well. I went to see her a couple of years ago. She popped in to buy a couple of books, and she looks up from the cash register at me and she said, "I saw your name on the side of a bus going past last week," which was lovely. It was for the young Sherlock Holmes books. Macmillan had actually plastered me over a couple of double-decker buses, which is really sweet.
It wasn't that the 35 goes to Andy Laird.
No. Where I found social media has served me very well is not necessarily the marketing side, although there is a large element of that. But because my podcast has been going quite a while now, and hence has built quite a large following and quite a large audience, I've got a following such that when I put the proposal into a publisher, you have to fill out a bit that says about, what is your social media following like, and this sort of thing. And because it's built up quite well over the years now, they read that part of the proposal and they go, oh, ready-made marketing audience. And it actually serves you really well in that sense. So it's not so much,
considering what they normally do.
yeah, because the history press normally won't republish an author for 2 years after they've published one. But yeah.
You have to stand in the naughty corner.
Yeah. Yeah.
You go to the back of the queue and then your turn comes.
They're like, right, you've published your book, off you go, that's fine. But we published 2 in successive years, and they've offered us a 3rd contract now because that following has worked really well.
Which I would argue, traditional publishing is only interested in money.
Yes.
They see that money and follow us and go, oh yes, we'll have that.
Yeah, absolutely. But then they give you some of that money at the end, and that's quite good because we like to pay bills.
When we discussed this in the bar briefly,
Did
two
we?
of us,
Oh, yeah.
you weren't there, you didn't turn up to the meeting, what can I say? We were going to do where you
It was advertised on social media. Why weren't you there?
I don't follow David, he doesn't use Facebook properly.
Did you not get our Instagram? No. We were going to do where to get your ideas from and work that way, but we're going backwards. We've got the publishing straight away. If anybody has a question, please bring your hand up and redirect this rambling nonsense that you're hearing from us.
We can talk about ideas if they don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure because I was late to the discussion if you already spoke about that, but how important or how much influence do the book reviews, the online reviews in, what's the name of the thingy? Where you can write book reviews and give the... Goodreads, exactly. How much influence do they have on your sales, or do you not check on that?
Well, you were late, but you only missed The Secret of Writing. That's all. Goodreads and reviews.
It's the equivalent of the cantina in Star Wars, isn't it? It's a hotbed of unpleasantness. Goodreads is just, it's like, trolls used to live under bridges, but now they live on Goodreads.
Sorry, how many people in the audience are on Goodreads? Right.
I think that's fine. I'm not tarring everybody with the same brush, but
You two back on your bridge.
I think Goodreads has started to get a reputation for unpleasantness. So,
Yeah.
but the reviews are important. But good reviews.
I was just curious because people make such a thing about it as if it's the only thing that gives you sales or something.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, reviews are very, very important. If you read a book and you like it, please leave a review. And it doesn't have to be an in-depth, the subtle underlying metaphor of this novel. No, just brilliant, loved it, 5 stars, that'll do the trick.
Yeah.
Because it's a numbers game. On Amazon, if you've got no reviews, no one will look at it. You get over 10 reviews, you're into another league division. You get 3 reviews, another league division above that. I mean, 101 is so much more important than 99.
Yeah. And the reason for that is when you hit 100, Amazon will then put your book in the customers who bought this book might also like a category at the bottom. Those books don't appear in there until you've got reviews.
I did actually fall foul of that algorithm, not personally, but I'm looking for books. I think I was looking for James Bond books. books. It said customers who buy James Bond books also buy books on crochet knitting. Your algorithm has subtly gone wrong somewhere.
Not necessarily. A lot of women like that, and
That's true.
they also like handicrafts. So
Does it matter whether you put in just the 5 stars and no comment, or do you need that comment as well?
I mean, I guess the more you do, the better it is. But I think if you go to the level of a deep underlying metaphor, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, 5 stars of a word would be fine. I don't know about just putting in 5 stars. You notice I'm only saying 5 stars here.
Just get the idea and take the text now. That's the correct number of stars.
This is cognitive behavioural therapy.
It is,
You're a linguistic program.
Amazon goes for, you get a 5-star review or you get a 1-star review. Nobody seems to go in between. Goodreads, a 3-star review is a good review, and so it should be. But on Amazon, the book arrived and the bloke left it on the step and it got wet, 1 star, hated it. You know?
Yeah.
A book reviews.
Sorry, I'm going to go off on a tangent because I do that quite a lot. I was at a literary festival a few years back, and I ended up in the restaurant hotel with just me and Fluffy Mix. I'm trying to remember her name. Think of celebrity chefs. Female.
The recipe.
No. No.
Fanny Credit.
No.
Friedstein.
No. Female.
Oh, female.
Anyway.
Julia Smith.
No, the other one. The one who does celebrity play.
Mary Berry.
No, the other one. The other one.
Truly.
So no.
Truly?
I think it might be. Yes. Anyway, I ended up in the restaurant with her and her husband, and we got on like how we just had dinner together. We were comparing notes, and she was there because she'd just written a crime novel, called Cozy Crime.
Really?
I don't think it was Prelete, I think it was something like that. But we ended up talking, and she said she did a presentation at the Literary Festival about this fiction she'd written, and at the end of it, a lady came up and wanted to buy the book, so she put on. And the Prelete, let's assume it was Prelete, she kept on signing and talking to people. Half an hour later, this lady came back and handed the book back and said, I'm sorry, I don't want this. I thought it was a recipe book.
Well, I've written a Cozy Biscuit book that has a recipe in it. It's got a recipe. Can you carry on?
For various reasons, I've been kind of scrolling through Kindle books for 99 pence. And that's pricing. And pricing points is a thing we can discuss. But self-published books on Amazon for Kindle, if you look at it, there's a kind of little formula that people use for, and the phrase always seems to be with an explosive twist, or with a twist you'll never see coming. And cozy crime is a big thing as well.
But when you're talking about bandwagons, if any rumour goes round that if you say has an explosive twist, or the cover is slightly blue and that sells, people will go berserk, and it'll be all light blue covers with explosive twists.
Yes. That's the problem. Sorry, I'm going to do the trad publishing bit because you know that's the niche you forced me into. One of the problems with the trad publishing, with cover designs in particular, because from the point of view of the trad publisher, if you're going to a bookshop, it's the cover that's going to drag you in, that from the title. But if you look at, they always follow this trend of, let's have a fantasy novel, let's have a hooded figure with a hood pulled down so you can only see the chin. Or let's have a figure with their back to the viewer, so that you, the reader, can project yourself into it, and it's all clumsy and quite artificial.
But there are certain themes, aren't there, that have to be followed. A thriller has to have somebody in silhouette running against a coloured background. A family saga has to have
period thrillers, shadowy figure with the top hat.
Yes. Family sagas have to have the head.
Pretty dress headless woman.
Yes, the historical ones. Yes, which is something that Karen Maitland, I think, was complaining about in a panel, wasn't it? Is that Karen Maitland and Michael Jacks are very good friends, both historical fiction writers, and they were in a panel together. And Karen Maitland was complaining about the fact that publishers seem to have gone down this route of having these female figures on the covers, but they're always from the neck down, with no head, and how terrible this was. And how
that's quite that's serious crime.
Yeah, yeah, and how for women it was a really poor representation. And Michael Jackson's last book had just come out and had that exact thing.
I remember talking to a writer called Colin Greenland, who some of you may know. It's a science fiction writer. I don't know what's happened to him now. I don't even know if he's still alive, but certainly back in the late 80s, we used to be at science fiction conventions together. And he was very, very left-wing, very right-on, and I guess woke before woke was a thing. And he wrote a science fiction book with a very, very strong female protagonist, very kind of realistically described, very serious. And the cover that the publisher put on it had this busty woman in a spacesuit. And he was furious. He was actually incendiary furious at that.
But you're saying that tropes sell, basically?
I think they can. I've certainly been with publishers where they've said, "Oh yes, your book. We want something we want a cover design that's like it breaks all the boundaries. It's innovative. It's never been seen before. Just like that one and that one and that one." When you actually listen to yourselves,
that's the point. There's two things to take from that. One is if you're doing a cover, it must fit in with the genre that you are writing to and stand out. So it's got to fit in and stand out, which is impossible to do. And the other takeaway from what you're saying is if you independently publish, you're in charge of your cover, so you're never, if you don't like your cover, it's your fault.
yes.
You can't have that incendiary reaction.
Yeah, but certainly looking through Amazon at self-published books, cover design is actually really important. You can see a lot of people have just photoshopped a couple of things together and thrown it. No, you can tell, you can spot whether it's been done.
There's a real...
Sorry, you haven't done that.
There's a real art and trick to book cover design. I'm in New Street Authors back in Birmingham. Because Andy is part of BCU, the university, the art department came to him and said, "We've got our book cover design module. Couldn't we have some real writers turn up, pitch their books, and we'll get the students to do artwork for them?" So we duly turned up, we pitched our books. We did this 3-4 years on the trot. I think the pandemic shot it in the foot. And then these 30 students at university level would go away and do their book cover design. And then we would come back with our presentations. And the number of book covers that were unusable was extraordinary.
Yeah.
You know, very, very few of the students over the 3-4 years got it. I would say 5%. And the others were, I mean, sometimes the artwork was great, but it was not a book cover.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. It was terrible art. It was just not suitable for a book.
I mean, some of it was terrible art.
Okay.
I mean, in one of my books, I pitched Crossing the Bridge, I remember. Got quite an odd range of people. I think the other pitches were the ones the students wanted to go for. If you didn't choose one quickly, that got mine. And one of the students who was just awful. I had to give my reaction. I mean, no, it's not really usable. And then the lecturer went, "Yeah, it's dreadful, isn't it? You're poor, I've not done the work properly." He just laid it for 5 minutes or whatever. Oh, God, it's bad, but please.
I remember when I first got a contract for the Young Sherlock Holmes books, of which there are 8 now. Right now.
Are they on sale in the other room?
No, they're not.
Ah, okay.
I'm a plug jar here.
Yeah, there was quite a long discussion within Macmillan Children's Books about what the colour should be. And the point they started with was the kind of, you probably know what I mean, the kind of cartoony, slightly animated kind of look, kind of Darren Sher kind of almost manga style Young Sherlock Holmes. And then they moved away from that and they went to, eventually we ended up with a kind of silhouetted image, funnily enough, of a young Sherlock Holmes with a sword, with a kind of graphic design behind it. But the interesting thing was when it started to sell to foreign territories, I remember when the first American copies arrived, I eagerly ripped open the box and took it out. And it was like, it was a photographic cover. They'd hired a male model, a 17-year-old guy, dressed him up in Victorian waistcoat, and took photographs. And I looked at it and thought, they put Justin Bieber on my book. It's long floppy hair. So you know, the UK thing, oh yeah, exciting adventure for boys. The American thing, look, cute boys for girls. And then look at how the various international ones, the Chinese edition of the Young Sherlock Holmes books. It's like Doctor Strange. It's the glowing.
Which one sold the most though?
You know, I don't know. I never actually see the figures. Probably different territories will have, you know, the Japanese covers are very much manga. The South Korean covers are very much manga. I guess that sells into that territory, but it probably wouldn't sell so well into England. I will say, just on bookshelves, the bookshops, by the way, Derek Landy. You familiar with Derek Landy? He's a Scott Overy Pleasant in children's author. Landy, L-A-N-D, Lane, L-A-N-E. He goes just in front of him, the bookshelves. So I actually go around bookshops in different towns and cities, and if I find his books are cover out and mine are spine out, I'll change it around so that his goes spine out, mine go cover out. And then so a couple of times I've gone back to a shop a couple of weeks later, and it's changed back again. And I have this terrible suspicion that Derek Landy and I are following each other around, swapping our books.
all authors do that who are traditionally published, without exception.
Yes.
Independently published authors, like at this end of the table, don't get into bookshops, so we don't have to do that.
We're in the Leprechaun Museum.
Oh, well, all right.
It's a museum.
Apart from the Leprechaun Museum. Yeah.
Is it a small museum?
We're very big in the Leprechaun Museum.
I want to do a quick survey of the audience because this is supposed to be about writing craft and we've done nothing but talk
We
about
should probably
publishing.
do that.
Yeah. So how many people here are interested in just talking about publishing? And how many people here are interested in the writing? So publishing, hands up. And how many from the writing side of things?
It's about 50-50.
Oh dear.
Writing is slightly topic when we talk about publishing.
Okay. Give them writing in turn then.
Any quick questions about publishing before we move on to writing?
no.
All right, any quick questions about writing before we move on to writing?
Not you, sir, you had your chance.
Go on,
Anyway, I was just wondering, when, before you became established writers and actually looked to publish or anything like that, when was it in your writing that you thought, I can do this? Because there's a lot of us who have tried and don't have that confidence to make that leap. Does that make sense?
Yes.
When did you feel like you could actually pull this off or actually make a living at it? Or
Shall I get
even put yourself out there?
Yeah.
I wanted to be a writer from a very early age. I attempted to write novels, which I shall have to bring along one year for the Turkey Union. Seriously. And then Dawn here got me interested in amateur drama.
It's all my fault.
It's all her fault. Went along to amateur drama. I was a bloke, turned up, oh, you can have a major part.
Yeah, bigger part than me.
No bitterness though.
No bitterness at all.
But to be fair, it was Queen Victoria.
We are not amused. And a little group for starting to act quite well, and so the director realised she could enter festivals again. We hadn't done that for 9 years. Gave us a series of one-act plays to do, which were all middle-aged couple in sour marriage. Just like 3 plays about middle-aged couples in sour marriage. Ghastly. So I said, oh, I can do better myself. Wrote this play about a young couple not in a sour marriage, or even married. Did it in a festival, and then, oh, you have to turn up on a Saturday because that's when you give out the awards. So we arranged to go to the Indian afterwards. We turned up at the festival for the awards, and we won the Rose Bowl. Whack, piece of silver. And mind it, it was that big. And we had to pay the Indian grade, but we had to give it back. Went for the Indian meal afterwards, you know, the cast and trophy. And it was when I was drinking lager out of this thing. So I thought, I like this writing lark. And it is because I found an audience. I think that is the critical thing. I've just done the BBC Maestro course by Lee Child. He talks about you're all storytellers if you can reach an audience. So if you've been doing PowerPoint presentations in your company, you are performing, you are reaching an audience, so you know how to do stories and writing and how to put things across. And that resonated with me because I found an audience. For a number of years, I did this festival, writing a one-act play, and I learned the craft doing it. Because in a play, the audience laughs at the joke or it doesn't. It gasps at the shocking, explosive twist, or it doesn't.
Yeah, the boys go, we saw that coming.
You hide in the audience and you watch them. You learn what works or what doesn't. Finding an audience, that would be mine when you know you can do it. Yeah?
My I can do this moment was when I wrote this. It's 50 minutes of historical play. Some of you have seen it, some of you have not. Some of you listened to it, some of you have not, because this is the audio version of it. That all came about purely because being a slightly late bloomer, I didn't go to a traditional university. I did an OU history degree. And having done it, I wanted to do something with it. And so I kind of hit the idea of saving a moment in history and wanting to preserve the words that were actually being spoken at the time. So I ended up with these 4 pages of witchcraft trial evidence, which were used in 1687. And although what I had in front of me were not the words of the actual people who were involved, it was not the witness words because it was a deposition, it was being written by the clerk, so already one stage removed from the actual person. But the story that these 4 pages were telling was so compelling that I had to do something with it. And it became this. And it's the piece of writing which I have done. I've still got at home in the attic, because I saw them yesterday, the big pieces of cardboard that I got. I had 3 big pieces of cardboard and a bunch of post-it notes because I am a stationery nerd. So I wrote all my facts and bits and pieces of information that I dug out of the historical record, stuck them on these pieces of card. So there was one for the victim, there was one for history, and there was one for the sort of legal process. So they all went into their categories. And then I moved them around to create the story. And it's the only thing that I've ever written when I finished that last full stop and saved it, I did not go back and edit it. And that is...
Please, can I just throw something in on it? we may or may not get on to actual tools for writing. And stationery is a really good one. There is a software package called Scrivener, which I use, in which you can do exactly that. You can have post-it notes on the screen and you can drag it back.
Drag it
back and forth. And it will actually rearrange. If you've got like a block of text or a chapter associated with that post-it note, it will move that chapter as you
and if
read.
you're a procrastinator, it's really good for that as well, because you can move things around, so you don't actually do any writing. You just
you can also colour code. I wrote 3 books which only came out in America about Robinson Crusoe as a 17-year-old who gets rescued from the island and comes back to the UK and has like survivalist adventures. But I had about 4 or 5 different point of view characters, and I could colour code them. And then I could look at the colour code on the screen and say, oh, right, Daniel Defoe hasn't been in this for a while because there's no purple. I will write some more Daniel Defoes. So from an analytical point of view, it's brilliant.
Yeah, that's a software version of what I was doing.
Yes,
That was my...
How you plot your crimes too, isn't it, in real life?
I looked into Scrivener and I thought, oh, you can colour code things. That's going to be a glorious time wasting exercise. So I didn't try it.
Yeah, well, it's like the Arnold Rimmer thing in Red Dwarf, where you spend all your time developing your revision timetable, colour coding with tact, and then, oh my God, it's the exam tomorrow.
Yeah, that would be me. That would be with that.
Yeah.
How did you know when you could do it?
I think for me, I've been writing and contributing to things for a while, you know, like magazine articles, lists and this and that. I did start a long time ago, and I started by contributing little bits and things like that, which was great. And it's when things go into things and stuff, that's quite nice to see. But it doesn't really give you that feeling of having done that. So for me, I think it was when people started coming up to you and saying, I read this and I want to talk about it. When people appreciate what you do and perhaps try and seek it out. When you get emails and say, I want to buy this book, but it's not available on Amazon because the publisher of my first book won't sell through Amazon, for example. So people email me and say, I want to buy it, but it's like £100 on Amazon from some, you know, bizarre company overseas who try and con people out of money. And I think when people actually physically seek you out to tell you something that they enjoyed or something that they want to talk about, then that, for me, is that moment where you go, actually, people are appreciating what you do. It's slightly different because with non-fiction, it engages people, I suppose, in a different way, and they want to talk about the subject matter as well. And that for me, I think, is what I like.
Yeah. You realise you've got an audience.
Yes.
Fan base.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hello again.
Yeah, I thought you had that. Yes, go on.
No, that was an interjection.
Oh, you interjected. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually developed through fandom, through writing fan fiction stories for Doctor Who, back in the day when it was before the internet, where you had fans who photocopied A4 or folded over A5, stapled together with reviews of stories and people writing stuff, analytical articles. I once wrote an analytical article about the use of hot drinks in Doctor Who. The number of times tea and coffee gets mentioned. There you go. So I probably ended up writing 25 or 26 fan fiction stories in fanzine. Starting off, you kind of start off when you're 15, Daleks versus Cybermen, with Sontarans appearing as the surprise twist at the end.
Yeah.
But then by the end of it, you're much more into the character stuff and what happens to the companions after the Doctor's left, which is very much what the series is now, funnily enough. But I kind of learned my craft through that. Then you get the feedback from the letters pages in the next issue of the fanzine, which is great. But I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here. I'm going to come back, trust me.
Okay.
He does trust me, it's so sweet. I do, I used to, COVID's kind of put a stop to it. I have done quite a few school visits, going to schools, talking to the kids about creativity and writing and stuff like that. And there's always a kid in the audience who says, what advice would you give to anybody? You think, oh, you want to be a writer, don't you? There's always one. So what advice would you give to somebody who wants to be a writer? And I've always said, well, there are three things I would say. Firstly is just write whatever you can, write diary entries, write scraps of paper, anything you can, just to rehearse your craft. Number two is read as much as you can, because partly you need to know what's going on in your field. If you're going to write teenage fiction, you don't want to spend 5 years of your life on something about a kid called Barry Trotter who's at a school called Pigwards. And you take it to a publisher after 5 years, and they say, you know what? It's been done. So you need to know what the state of the art is. The third thing I want to say to them is read bad books. And the teachers always go, no, it's important, because if you want to be a writer, nothing teaches you how to write better than a bad book. Because if you read it, you think, why is this bad? Do I not believe the characters? Do I not like the plot? Is the style wrong? Analyse it, work out what it is. But there are two important points that I came to, and I think most writers will come to when they do that. Number one is, I can do better than that. And that's the real, I can be a writer. And the second one is, I have done better than that. And that's a really important point where you think, you know what, no, I have been better than Dean Koontz. I choose that as a random example. Dean Koontz has published 15,000 novels. Slight exaggeration, probably 50 or 60. They're terrible. They are really badly written. But there is something addictive about it. He actually drags you in. I don't know how he does it. I tried to analyse his... who's the guy that does... Dan Brown. Dan Brown. Dan Brown is another one. He's a terrible, terrible writer. But he's got an addictive hook that he's developed. And if you can work out what that is, that's a really valuable thing.
I've brought Dan around a lot of time.
I've brought up a lot of times reading them. I couldn't resist that.
They always lay into it's bad writing or how he does bad. I think, okay, fine, but stop. What is he doing that clearly works?
Yes.
It works for me.
And what he's doing, I think, that works in his case, is that he's using elements of the real world that are just plausible enough that you can consider that maybe there's something more in it. So it hooks you, because not necessarily because of the writing style or the characters, but because there's some kind of association with things that you might know around you yourself, and it draws you in that way. That's for me, anyway.
The first book he did, which was, remind me, what was it called? Da Vinci Code. Based very much on a non-fiction book about the Templars by Merlin Haseman and Henry Lincoln, who were the guys that invented the abominable slogan for Doctor Who.
The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail.
Holy Blood, yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
What's very interesting is that somebody pointed out that Dan Brown nicked everything from the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. So the publishers for the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail sued Dan Brown's publishers. And only a few months later realised they were suing themselves.
Also, that's one of the rookie errors they made. The other one was arguing that, Dan Brown's stolen all the stuff from our book. But excuse me, you're saying your book is non-fiction. So he's stolen facts. Yes.
Another question. There were more people who wanted, slightly more people who wanted to know about the writing part. There must be more than one question. Yeah.
What do you like to read individually, each of you?
David Wake.
That's sweet.
I think the ball's in your court now.
The unexpected, shocking twist.
It's going to be Andy Lane.
Neighbour book. Go on, I dare you. Neighbour book.
Young Sherlock Holmes in New York.
It's the one place he hasn't gone. I'm actually going through a massive binge jag at the moment of 1970s, late 60s thrillers. So Alistair MacLean, Desmond Bagley, all the classics, and they are brilliant. And they're brilliant because they are actually quite simple in a good way. Books these days, I think, are far too complicated.
Yeah.
You get a Robert Galbraith / J.K. Rowling crime novel. It's that thick. But if you want just something to occupy you for 3 or 4 days, go back. So I've also been reading a lot of Roger Zelazny from the 1970s. I'm a big fan of Tim Powers, Jonathan Carroll, people like that. So I actually, a year or two back, I looked at my massive bookshelves of things I haven't read yet. And I came up with a spreadsheet of the 1,000 books I want to read before I die. And literally, it is 1,000 books. And it's not just the ones in my bookshelf that I haven't read, but also all the ones I've got on my Kindle that I've downloaded.
I don't look at my Kindle.
So I'm actually working my way through the list of 1,000 books I want to read before I die. I'm working through Desmond Bagley, Alistair MacLean and so on. But I realised I'm buying books faster than I'm reading them. So my 1,000 books I want to read before I die is currently up to 1,557. But I reckon, sorry?
You're just going to have to live longer.
I reckon a book a week, I can actually do that.
Lee Child, he writes one book a year, he reads 300. His entire course is basically read a lot. And that was true of...
That's a book a day, with a couple of days off for good behaviour.
Yeah, it is phenomenal. But he skim reads. One of his major criticisms, one of his pieces of advice was you must repeat things endlessly about the book to remind the reader. I'm thinking, that's because you skim read, isn't it?
There's a lot of thriller talk. What are your views on James Patterson? I'll tell you where this is going in a minute, depending on what you say.
Right. think I mentioned at the beginning that I have actually ghostwritten novel. I've ghostwritten 3 crime novels. So I hardly want to complain about celebrity writers bringing in somebody to basically write the whole thing for them. But I think James Patterson's okay. I mean, yes, his name sells. He's a brand. He's the Tesco's, he's the Sainsbury's, he's the Waitrose. Well, maybe not the Waitrose of fiction. Maybe he's the Asda of.
Wow.
So, yeah, if people are buying a James Patterson book, they know what they're getting. What they're getting is a back of an envelope by James Patterson, filled out to 90,000 words by some poor schlep like me.
For those who don't know, so James Patterson essentially writes the plot of his books, then passes it to an author who writes the book, and then goes back and him to just check it over and go, yeah, that's what we're going to do, all right, okay. But lots of authors do that. The difference with James Patterson is that he's always been very open about the fact that that's what he does, which is a good thing. And he's very supportive of authors and literature, which is also a good thing. But it's been, for me, as an author, undermined a little bit by his publisher with the last book. The reason being that the books used to say on the front, James Patterson, in big letters, with Maxine Kedro, or whoever the co-author is. The latest one, the publishers have only put the co-author's name inside the book, in the cover. So it now only says James Patterson. And you have to get inside before you realise it's somebody else.
I picked up a Linda LaPlante book some years ago in a bookshop. I was just kind of flicking through it, and I saw on the acknowledgements page it said, I'd like to thank Trevor Hoyle for writing this book. I simplify slightly, it was a little more wordy than that, but it was very obvious. You know, Trevor Hoyle, of course, wrote the first 3 Blake 7 novelisations. So there you go. What really annoys me, it's people like David Walliams, who, you know, they don't even, he's probably never actually read any of the books that he has supposedly written. Yeah. And if you ask him about the plot of it, he won't know what's going on. It's some poor, okay, it's a means of employment for writers. You get paid for it. I actually got paid quite well for ghostwriting, which is not necessarily a problem. But, no, acknowledgement would be nice. Can I jump from that to something else? Translators. Should a translator's name go on a book?
Yes. They have to colour it. They've got to change it in some way.
We're not talking about colouring books. No, you're right. Sorry.
Asterix the Gaul's a good example. It was translated from French into English by a lady called Anna Theobald for years. And she didn't just translate word for word. She tried very hard to keep the spirit of the punning and the jokes and the language jokes consistent all through that time.
I've read a couple of foreign writers, Guy de Maupassant and Italo Calvino, in different translations, same book, but different translators. And it does read as a different book. The translator adds so much to the process. So, yes, I think the translator's name should go on the book. I did some years back, I was invited off to Greece, to Athens, for 4 or 5 days to do a series of events there on Sherlock Holmes. And I ended up being taken around by my translator, Andreas, who was a lovely guy. Can I tell my story?
Please.
You see the way I subtly, taking advantage of a whole series of little moments there. We were sitting in the bar one night, having a drink, talking about the translation process, and I said, look, I'm really, really sorry. One of the young Sherlock Holmes books that I did, the whole plot centres around a pun, a really, really bad pun, where somebody's left a message for Sherlock Holmes, a message that nobody else will understand. What they do is they leave a decapitated rabbit's head in a burrow, and so Sherlock finds the head. He's like, Edinburgh. They've gone to Edinburgh. And I said to Andreas, look, I'm really, really sorry. It didn't occur to me that joke would have to be translated. What did you do? And he just looks at me and said, I put in a footnote saying that works in English. ago when I was at university, I bought, I think, volume 9 of the collected writings of Sigmund Freud. Only volume 9 because it was Sigmund Freud on humour and the subconscious mind. So it's a book on humour, translated from German. Now, whatever you think about the German sense of humour, the book was actually littered with German jokes translated that weren't funny. And then, like, little footnotes from the translator saying this works in German. It's actually really funny in German.
On that, I would also agree with you. Japanese is exceedingly difficult, mainly because there is no one-to-one between kanji and basically Latin text. So you can get something like the train left the tunnel and it's snowing. But because of the kanji chosen, it's actually written in the English as the express train was hurtling through the dark tunnel and came out into the blizzard.
Yes.
But you got the basic, but because of the way it was written in Japanese, that's how it should be translated. And I've done some translation of anime in the past, and quite often you see the commercial one, and they've got the punchline at the beginning of the visual joke, because they've just translated it literally.
Yes.
When, of course, for the flow, the punchline should be the final scene with the actual punchline.
I had dinner once with the Japanese publisher of the Anne Shorthand's books, and we were talking, she had also published the Japanese translation of Memoirs of a Geisha. And she said they had a real problem in translating that because the writer was obviously written in English, but the writer had gone into like pages and pages of description about geishas and how they operate and what the kind of the social and moral things are. She said, but we all know that. It's inherent knowledge in Japan. It's as if in a Japanese book translated into English, we've done 5 pages on the number 5 bus from Paddington.
Yes, it has a conductor who's called Fred.
Yes, it's a ticket machine.
Yes.
Anything else? How many people are writing? Oh, sorry, Karen.
How to say that? Do you all have been writing for some time. Do you find that you have to change your writing style for today's audience? Because I quite enjoy books that are a bit more descriptive, not Lord of the Rings descriptive, no, but tell a bit more. And I find a lot of modern books are quite, the sentences are quite short and not as elegant as I like to write and read it. So does that influence you? Or do you think you have to pay attention to that when you write? Or do you just write your story like you get it in your head?
I write at what's in my head and then I read it out loud. So I'll read my last one to you and you fell out with me. There was an explosive twist.
There was an explosive twist. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. Well, sometimes to say it's still in the book.
Yes. Yeah. But no, I will write what's in my head and then I will read it back. And if it sounds really kind of, I don't know, not like speech, I'm very particular about, does it sound like speech? You know, does it sound like people talking? So if I read it out loud and it doesn't sound like speech, then it goes back and it gets changed. Also, something comes out incredibly wordy and I'm reading it aloud and taking a breath in the middle, I can't finish the sentence, then that changes. So, you know, it's things like that. I want, you know, it'd be nice if people read something out loud and didn't die partway through one of the sentences. So,
how often does that happen?
You've heard me talking, so you know, you know, it's things like that. You know, I always read everything out loud, and if it doesn't sound right to me, then if I can't read my own sentences without gasping for air, then nobody else will be able to. So yeah, things like that, then yes, I would change. Sometimes I'll change a word if it sounds a bit pretentious. But yeah, what comes out first is what the movie screen at the front of my head is showing me, and then it gets refined afterwards.
I don't think I know anybody who's changed their writing style according to the latest fashion.
No,
No.
Yeah, it's
But
just
you are talking sort of about trying to develop your own voice,
yeah.
your particular mix of.
Also, I think you're looking at, sorry to interrupt, I think you're looking at pitching to the audience. So who is, I hate to get into semiotics here, but you know, who is the audience? Because I've spent a lot of time working in the kind of 9 to 14 area, you do have the question in your mind of, do I simplify it? Do I do shorter sentences? Do I have less complicated descriptions? And I think, like you, have decided not to do that. I write what I would like to write, or what I would like to read.
Yeah.
But I've had parents come up to me at literary festivals and say, thank you for using difficult words, because my son or my daughter went off to the dictionary or to Google to work out what that word was. So and, you know, I learned so many words when I was reading books that I didn't know, and I had to go away and check. So I think we almost have an obligation to write up slightly rather than write down.
Otherwise you end up with newspeak, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, and there's so much dumbing down these days everywhere else anyway. I mean, I read something not so long ago which said that the average attention span now is like 8 seconds or something. It's like, that's less than a goldfish. Or, what are we doing?
Sorry, what is it?
But, you know, for me, that's horrifying, you know. As a reader, as a writer, as somebody who spends a lot of time looking at old documents and stuff, just like 8 seconds of focus. Like, how do we function with that? What are we teaching our children?
Very tricky for non-fiction.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
be able to construct an argument.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that, I think that is one of the major shifts in society for the youth versus ourselves. I say ourselves, all the old people, is attention span. We grew up in an information-poor environment. You're going to go to the library to look things up. You're going to ask people. Nowadays, the skill is pushing information away. People spam them, but that's the skill that users today have to develop. And they've developed it very well, so they're trying to teach people something, or educate them in that loose sense of writing a book, even a fiction book. They push it away, they push the information away. It's a massive shift in human population, and its effects we will see in a few generations back.
I mean, I've had to, with Alyssa,
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about her, but she was very resistant to reading, and as parents with an entire room full of books and bookshelves in every room in the house, that was kind of horrible. So she's 15 now, and she's started to get into books because all her friends have suddenly started recommending books to each other, so she got in on the game. Yeah, she a few weeks ago, she said, "Can we go to the bookshop in Barsford?" Yes, of course we can. Buy whatever you like. But with her, thinking about the attention span thing, thinking about the access of information thing, I used to say to her, when she said, you know, what does this word mean? I would say, look it up in the dictionary. No, she won't look it up in the dictionary. She won't even go in the room where the dictionary lives. What I have to say to her is, oh, I'm sure you can probably find out something about that on Google. Or, oh, you must be able to get a tutorial on that on YouTube. And now, it's great because we'll say something in the car. Oh, just Google that for you, Mother. Yes, God.
If we stories about kids, Robbie, who many of you will know Robbie of old. You probably remember him when he was that tall. He's now 6'5", he's taller than I am. He developed this thing of whenever he wanted to research something, he would go to YouTube and check out the videos. And we were in the car once, and he said, "Oh, yeah, Dad, I was wondering about like ghosts and things like, do ghosts exist?" So I went and checked it out on YouTube, and apparently they do.
So yeah, I mean, with her, it was more kind of getting her into the mindset of looking for information and not just kind of going, how does this work, but being proactive on it.
But interestingly, the first book she chose from Waterstones was biography
It
of
was the
Princess
Andrew
Diana.
Norton biography
The
of
Andrew
Princess
Norton.
Diana.
I thought for a minute there, I thought you were going to say it was a dictionary.
That was the first book she chose. And the reason that she chose that book is because Princess Diana videos are very highly trended on TikTok at the moment. And because of that, and the fact that she'd seen a lot of stuff about Princess Diana on social media,
And she binge-watched The Crown.
and she'd been across The Crown, and then bought the autobiography. And we went into her bedroom to see how she was getting on with reading it, and it's got pink post-it
And I
tabs
was
sticking
so
out.
happy.
All different.
It's like, this is my daughter.
Were you happy with the post-it tabs or because they were
It was mostly the stationery.
It was mostly because there were post-it tabs, because I've got a book on my desk at the moment, which is exactly the same.
Yeah. My agent and I are discussing pitching a series of teenage horror supernatural novels to various publishers. Her thing is, because, again, we get back to that, we want something cutting edge that's just like that. Her pitch is, it's a UK version of Goosebumps. And I kind of want to get away from that. But I did buy 10 Goosebumps books on eBay. And I started reading the first one, but I cannot actually read this. It is so simplistic, so simplified. I as a writer can't write that, and I don't want to read it. But then R.L. Stein is possibly the best-selling author in the whole of the world.
Yet R.L. Stein is not poor.
Yes, what do we know? What do we know?
I've got a question.
Oh.
You've self-published. I have a couple of things that I am going to be self-publishing at some point in the future. You've self-published and you're traditionally published as well. We have all considered or have done self-publishing. Would you, if you were offered a trad publishing contract for a book, take it?
Very good question.
I've got a contract right here.
I share my face in the independent publishing industry author. I used to at Eastercon religiously go to all the how to get published panels and how to work panels. And I was going to a panel at a convention in Eastercon, and someone collared me and said, "Can you tell me something about independent publishing?" I thought, I'll have this conversation. So we had a conversation in the bar about it. And that particular panel, the trad publishers, got really angry. So I wish I'd gone there. Because they were being asked, independent publishing is doing so much better than you are, etc., etc., etc. They got angry because they knew their days are numbered, and they are numbered.
But there are a lot of well-established authors who also independently publish alongside you.
There's an awful lot of hybrids.
Yeah.
I suppose if I was given a contract, my question would be, well, what is in it for me? Whereas previously, 10, 20 years ago, I would just say yes without even using the contract. Now, what are you going to do? What marketing budget will I have, etc. Is this like in that direction? Yes. But I would consider it, yes, because there's a lot of people who are hybrid publishing. I did go to a literary festival, which was a guy who sold 400,000 copies of his book. Had a traditional publishing because, of course, you sold lots of books, let's give you a contract, let's take our 15, 20, 30%. But his next book, he was going to be independently published because he wanted it out quickly. So he's got the choice, which is kind of powerful. Independent publishing gives us writers the feeling of power. In fact, the power has shifted to the readers because nobody is saying you can read this and you can't read this if they can't get an editor or an agent. The reader gets to choose it.
I think the elephant in the room is, forgive me for saying this, an awful lot of self-published books are terrible because they have not gone through a decent editing process. The writer has just written the book, maybe done a bit of formatting. We'll talk about formatting in a minute because widows and orphans and kerning and all of that is actually important. But, so you end up playing something on Amazon, which the author has basically just put up there and you've taken it down. And you look at it and you think, this is badly written, it's badly formatted, I can't read it, there's logical inconsistencies. So the thing that traditional publishing does is, your book goes through probably 5 sets of hands, or 5 sets of eyes, before it gets published. So errors, inconsistencies, problems are hopefully removed. Now you can do that with self-publishing, I'm sure you do. You can have beta readers, you can have an editor, you can have a copy editor. But of course that adds time and money to the process. And it may be that a lot of self-published authors want to factor that out. But if you go on Amazon and look at detective novels for Kindle, you will find thousands of self-published, like there'll be a series of 10 books in the Detective Chief Inspector Smith series. And how much effort has gone into proofing those things?
And I can respond.
Please do.
Yeah. As things changed, traditional publishing started to play it safe. So we had the bad books and the good books, and it's all gradually narrowed. Independent publishing exploded, and the bad books got immediately even worse than anything. But the best books are now independent published,
Yes,
because they can take risks. But I mean, part of what New Street Authors does is we're a group of indie publishers who help each other. So my mate Andy Conway, and I said, well, you edit my book, I'll edit your book. And he happened to finish his first and to me to edit, and I spent a lot of time editing that for entirely selfish reasons. Because as soon as I gave it to him, he then had to edit mine to the same level. And I started doing this more and more.
But that implies well, it doesn't imply, he actually states a willingness on your part to say, yes, I will let somebody tell me where these errors are, what the problems are. I'm pretty sure that a lot of self-published authors don't like to be told.
That's true. Well, I can think of some examples I do not know who are entirely in that department. But once I started self-publishing, the quality control from myself and getting people to help me went up hugely. Far more than submitting readings, because suddenly it was going to be read by people. And that was slightly terrifying. So yeah, but it takes me longer and longer to get a book through the editorial process. Because you want your book to be better than the last one. And some traditionally published books awfully badly formatted, particularly new books, and badly edited.
I was reading a book on, I'm pretty sure I actually bought it on Kindle. Again, it was a 1970s thriller. But halfway through it switched to a different book. But somehow the editorial, whatever scamped process they had for checking through it, they mashed two different books together.
Well, there are some horror stories of people in the Amazon printed warehouse where they print half of one book and half another book and bind them together. That does happen. It's rare, to be honest.
Before self-publishing actually became a thing, I was told that Mills and Boon had this thing that they would buy several manuscripts from different romance writers and then actually cut and paste sections of them. So they'd take the beginning from one book, the middle from the second book, and the ending from the third book. I don't know how true that is, but I love the idea.
Did you hear about an author who was accused of plagiarism? He's done a thriller, and he'd actually cut and pasted lots and lots of famous thrillers. And the work he put into that is phenomenal.
Well, presumably less work to actually write his own
This
book.
is the point everybody thought, well, why didn't you just write your own?
But there was a book I bought which was published through a small press in Devon. And it was somebody I knew, so I wanted to be supportive, so I bought the book. I think I might have bought the first two. And I didn't get past the first paragraph on the first page of the first book, because in that paragraph it jumped tenses 3 times.
Wow.
I couldn't. Oh God. I couldn't.
Turkey really.
Yeah.
I started professionally editing. I've done enough of it now, I think I can do that.
Yeah. But I mean, switching tenses is an interesting book, because Ian Fleming does that in the Bond books. I mean, I think if you know what you're doing, it can work. But if you don't know what you're doing,
This was just careless.
Yes. I co-wrote a couple of science fiction novels with the guy I met, which is probably a bad thing. We met in a bookshop, we got on, we had a lot of stuff, we were about the same age, and he had some good ideas, so we said, all right, let's write a science fiction novel. So we wrote a couple of chapters, submitted it, Titan Books, gave us a contract for 3 books. And I realised as we were going on that Nigel, who was this guy on the writing with, had this habit of switching tenses all over the place, including the point at which I said, no, we have to stop, was when we had 2 people in a car driving, and the point of view switched to a sheep that was by the side of the road watching the car go past, and then back to the second person in the car. I thought, it's absolutely true. I thought, no, Nigel, we need to have a talk. It was that the kinky sex scenes. That was why I stopped working with him.
What the words matter?
I'm not talking about the writing, I'm talking about me and him.
Just check.
Oh, yes.
Can I ask?
Yes.
So there's a member of the Mystery Authors Writer Group, the independent published group that Dave and I are a member of, which will remain nameless. And she's taken a specific decision to write to market. She has found out that crime thrillers, they sell a lot, so she's writing crime thrillers, she's looking at the tropes. So I'm not quite sure whether she's decided that she wants to be successful, which we can argue what that means, but she's decided she's going to sell a lot of books and make a lot of money from book writing. And I just wondered what your views was of that very deliberate writing to market.
Oh, I've done that myself recently. I want to, this is the Goosebumps series, and there's another, I want to write a kind of Stranger Things type, teenage Lovecraftian horror, which I don't think has really been addressed yet, Lovecraftian horror for teens, apart from Stranger Things. So what I did was, because this is an area I hadn't worked in before, I actually went out and looked at all the fantasy books for that kind of age range, and tried to break them down. Were they contemporary or were they historical? Were there adult characters in the book, or was it all just the kids? Was there a kind of hidden world that you accessed through some kind of gate, which is a trope of fantasy fiction, or not? And I actually broke it down and worked out what the most popular set of things was, and then I used that as the skeleton to actually build on. And I'm actually really happy with where it's going, and I think I've built some original stuff into it, but it does use a lot of the things that have cropped up before and appear to be attractive. No explosive twist, unfortunately.
I'll be the other end of the table from that one. Because I know that the point of view, if you have an idea that there needs to be written, therefore you have to write it. In that direction. But I am less successful than the person Don's talking about.
I think you can extend the thing to a different area. Look at music. You know, do you want to write the perfectly crafted pop single, or do you want to be Tom Waits or Nick Cave and just write your own really gnarly stuff? You've got to decide where you want to be on that. You know, are you Stock Aitken and Waterman, or are you Nick Cave?
And for me, it's different entirely, because as a non-fiction author, you really want to write about what you're interested in researching.
But that could, I mean, yes. But you could look at non-fiction books and go, oh, books on Princess Diana are selling lots.
Oh, yeah,
I'll go and write one of those. But I suggest you probably wouldn't, because it wouldn't be interesting to you.
Yeah, but more importantly, I think that if you didn't at least have some kind of grounding or knowledge in the subject that you're going to write about, and there are exceptions in non-fiction to this, you will tend to be not so hugely respected as an author, or alternatively, in some cases, you'll just be found out as a bit of a fraud.
Tell us about bees.
Bees. Bees are an interesting one, and sometimes you can turn things that you're not a massive expert in to your advantage. I'm glad you mentioned bees. So this book, Telling the Bees and Other Customs, is not about bees. Okay? It's about folklore and rural craft, one chapter of which is about beekeeping and mythology and superstition that regards beekeeping and bees in general, and how they were kept and those sorts of things. It's not about bees. But not so long ago, the Queen passed away. Okay? Then there was an article run in the Daily Mirror, I think, or Daily Mail, about Daily Mail about the fact that the Queen's beekeeper had informed the Queen's bees that the Queen had died. A very old custom, yeah, telling the bees about the death of a member of the family. Because that's slightly odd and curious, that article went viral because it's one of those things that if you're not interested in superstition, things like that particularly, you wouldn't necessarily know about. So that article went viral and it got picked up in various places. And because of that, I got contacted by the New York Times because they picked up on this book and its title and said, can we do an interview with you about the custom of telling the bees? Now, if they'd asked, you know, can we do an interview with you about bees, I probably would have said no. But in this case, it made sense. So I said yes, all right. So I did like a 5 to 10 minute phone interview with this reporter in London who worked for the New York Times. Didn't think any more of it. What I should have thought about was the New York Times. That's got quite a big circulator. And then I started getting emails and phone calls from other places who would obviously get other news sources who get their news from the New York Times. I can do. So I ended up
She generated quite a buzz about it.
Well, this is where this was going.
So I set the whole thing up.
The journalists were flocking like bees around the honeypot.
Yes, exactly. So I ended up getting contacted by lots of different news agencies who get their news from the New York Times. So I ended up doing interviews for Canadian National Broadcast, TV and radio, and Radio Dublin, and all sorts of places about this, which was great because it was a chance to talk about it. And then the kind of knock-on effect from that now is when I do talks and things about this subject, I tell this story just before the interval, and then remind people that my books are available at the back of the room, or whatever. And whenever I do that, I completely sell out of a big pile of that book, and not particularly anything else. So the point is that there's kind of a lot of influence comes from just these kinds of, you know, stories and the way that things are addressed.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that because clearly it wasn't part of your marketing plan to have the Queen die, nor was it.
I got Liz Trust to do that for me.
Nor was it part of your marketing plan to have the New York Times call you.
No.
So those are just things that are literally happy circumstances.
They are, so, yeah. and the other happy coincidence. The other happy coincidence, not related to the coincidence, from the whole thing was that a couple of weeks after all of this happened, I had an email from the publisher saying, we need to do a reprint of the book because there's not very much stock left and we're going to do a paperback edition next year. Are there any changes you want to make to the manuscript? And there weren't, because I'm quite happy with the manuscript. That's fine. And it then came back exactly the same, apart from the bit at the bottom on the front of the cover that now says, as featured in the New York Times. That has nothing to do with me. That has nothing to do with me. That is the publisher taking that information and going, oh, do you know what, that's quite a good, the same way that you can get decent sound bites for your cover from other authors. It's just a happy coincidence which they seized upon and now it's on the front of the book. And you can use these things to your advantage.
It's come to my consciousness that the person who's supposed to stop this talk is me. I haven't done so. We've overrun by about half an hour.
That sounds better.
We don't mind.
Nobody's left.
I'm quite happy to carry on.
Yeah.
I don't know what's next.
Yeah, you haven't, David. It's down till 5, but you are on another panel at 5.
Maybe a
You might want to have a comfort break.
Might be gone to see
Well, I would like I would like to thank my fellow authors for what has been very interesting. We didn't really talk about typing or anything like that, so we've left certain things of the craft out. I'm sure you can chat to any of us in the bar.
Come up with lots of questions.
Yes. Oh, well, we're all on the next panel, so that's kind of
I think somebody's been transcribing the entire session so it will come out as a limited edition book.
It'll be available tomorrow.
Please thank you to Andy Lane, Mark Norman, Tracy Norman, and myself, David Wood.